Welcome to the Restoration Group podcast, where we're sometimes silly, but we are always serious about investing in Oklahoma City leaders who desire to integrate their work into their Christian faith. I am your host, Clay Steves, and today I am joined by a longtime friend, a fellow Edmond Bulldog, and our guest, Jon Kuhlman. Jon has served as the Chief Culture Officer at Simple Modern for over 2 years. Simple Modern's mission is centered around giving generously. By the way, he gave me this mug this morning, so we're going to talk about giving generously and quality. Yeah, that's okay. I like it. It's not shameless. That's just a plug.
That's right.
That's just a plug right there. Simple Modern's mission is around giving generously, and generosity is at the heart of everything they do, from how they treat their employees, their partners, their vendors, and customers. And through the work of Jon and his team, more than 1,000 organizations, man, that's remarkable, have been supported around the globe. Jon, welcome to the show.
Clay, I am honored to be here, man. I've always admired you from our high school days together.
You just lost credibility with so many of our listeners.
No, not possible, man. We haven't hung out in a while, but
yeah.
what a better way to do it than to do it with a couple of microphones in front of our mouths.
Yeah,
right?
what a better way, right? As opposed to a cup of coffee. I mean, we got water, coffee,
we still have our
microphones.
Cups.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so I love starting with stories.
Okay.
So tell me the story of how you came to work at Simple Modern.
Yeah. So, man, you've kind of got to go back a little bit. So, in 2015, I was working for a small investment management firm in Oklahoma City, and it was a really positive experience for me, but not in the way that you might think. It's not external positivity; it was an internal positivity, and by that I just mean I was wrestling with a lot in my heart and in my spirit during that time. It was a really challenging time of my life. And through, just a few different circumstances, I decided to walk away from that work. I wrestled with that decision for 8-9 months before I did that. But I don't necessarily advise young people that I, might mentor or provide advice to walk away from something, but without another thing lined up. But I did, and it was a mutual decision between me and my wife, and lots of prayer. And so I was out of work. I was out of work for about between 2 and 3 months, which felt like an eternity for me. I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at the time, and have some very specific memories of that time being challenging. But yeah, I ended up, I had a few things that I thought might work out during that time. Yeah. Contacts and networked, just to kind of figure out what might be next for me. And they all just kind of dried up. It was really kind of strange. They all just kind of went away and didn't quite pan out to be any type of job. And so I remember reaching kind of the final thing that I thought was going to work out, said no. And
they said no.
They said no. Okay. Yeah. Let's be clear.
Okay. So
they did not want me.
Okay.
And, I started to kind of scramble for that. I almost kind of went back and tried to really strive for that to work out. And I had a really trusted friend who gave me some advice. He's like, man, this isn't it. You need to wait. And so I did. And, man, that was a really scary time. I mean, it was just really, I was anxious. I didn't know what was going to work, what was going to happen. Anyway, to get to the point, I got a call from an old college buddy of mine. And he said, hey, Jon, I heard you're a free agent, man. And free agent sounded better than unemployed. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'm a free agent. And he was like, man, I'd love for you to meet my business partner and I, and, there's a few things we have going. And so they didn't necessarily meet with me to hire me at Simple Modern, but they met with me and got to know me. And after that conversation, our CEO, he kind of was like, listen, I don't have a job title for you. I don't know what the role is. I've got a few things I think you could help us with, but here's what we're building. Here's what we're doing. Here's the vision. And I would love for you to come be a part of it. For 6 months, I've got 6 months of work. That's what I can promise. And Beyond that, we'll see. And, you know, I happen to be in a place, you know, having walked out in faith from the previous experience, I was in a place to be able to clearly listen and think this through and think it through with my wife and talk it through and kind of dream, where I was willing to say yes to a potential water bottle brand, you know, that hadn't done anything at that point. And really, you know, people scratched their heads at what it was that I was joining at the time. This wasn't like it is now, where you join Simple Modern and it's kind of a hopefully cool company that people want to be a part of. Yeah. That's not what this was at the time. It was a major leap of faith. And, but I was so, grateful for the opportunity and for our CEO believing in me. And so I said yes. And man, it's been a really fun ride ever since. I've done a lot of different things, you know, but most recently stepped into this new role that we call the Chief Culture Officer. So that's how it developed, I should say.
Okay, how long into the 6-month commitment till you knew you were going to roll further?
So it depends on who you ask.
Okay, so I'm asking you.
You're asking me. I felt like it was 5 months and 3 weeks.
Okay,
you know,
it was like at the very end.
It was at the very end that I felt like, okay, this is going to extend.
Said earlier.
Mike's way of telling the story, he'll laugh at this when he listens to this, but the way he tells the story is like, man, I knew within the first week.
You're like, you could have told me.
Yeah, it would have been really nice. Open communication here, right?
So
we need to have some more dialogue. But so yeah, I knew that it was something I would want to be a part of much earlier than that. But in terms of whether that was an opportunity for me, it took the majority of those 6 months, at least for me, you know, and my Enneagram 1 nature, you know, to kind of like to take the critic out of the equation and actually know this was going to move forward. So yeah.
Okay, so and then your current role, Chief Culture Officer.
Kind of a funny title, right?
No, I love it. I love it. So first, tell me what maybe traditional departments in like org chart are underneath Chief Culture Officer, and then define culture after that. So 2 parts on it.
Yeah, no, the role, you know, functionally is, you know, I obviously oversee hiring and recruiting, HR, kind of people operations is sort of a buzzword right now, but that kind of, you know, really oversee the operation of our people and the people side of our business. You know, I help steward the culture. You know, it's a little bit like the CFO. You know, if the only one that cares about their finances is the CFO, you're in a bit of a pickle. And it's everybody's responsibility to steward the finance as well. Yep. And I would say the same thing about the Chief Culture Officer. You know, I have the privilege and honor of kind of sitting in this seat, but it's all of our responsibility. And we try to hire people who recognize that, who love what we are trying to do and trying to build. And so that's maybe the more traditional answer. Part 2 was what? How do you define culture?
Yeah, how do you define culture?
Gosh, I don't have a great definition.
Talk about a buzzword in the world
you're telling
these days.
Man.
Everybody. So I'm saying, if you got that title, you've got to.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, you know, how overused is the word awesome?
You know, culture might rival it. Everything's awesome.
When you think about like, oh man, that was awesome. That. Oh, that goal was awesome.
Yeah,
that shot was awesome. Yeah. You're awesome. You know, and it's like, except really the word is supposed to mean like something you are in awe of. And it's kind of watered down the word a little bit. Now I use it all the time. I'm not pointing any fingers here.
Except back this way.
Yeah, exactly. But culture's a little bit like that, you know. Everybody talks about it. Everybody wants to talk about it. You know, I think, man, I don't have a great, you know, 1-2 sentence definition. I think it's everything, you know. It's the way you feel when you walk into a space. It's the mindset of the people that make it up. You know, culture is not anything without being lived and breathed by people. You know, there's great examples of companies that, you know, touted their culture, touted their values, hung posters on the wall for all to see, and you know, turns out like they're not actually living and breathing them, and it really means nothing. Yeah. And so for us, you know, and for me, you know, culture is like it's the ethos of a space. I mean, it's how you feel when you're there. It's the mindset of how people make decisions. It's the things that we value. It's the purpose behind what we're doing. I mean, this is all culture to me. And so we try to steward that well. You know, I often use the analogy, it's probably a little cheesy, but of culture like a greenhouse, you know? And so a greenhouse has a certain climate within it, right? There's a humidity level, there's a temperature, you know, there's a atmosphere that's created for certain fruit to grow within that greenhouse.
To thrive.
And to thrive. And you know, you have other greenhouses that have their own climate and have their own, you know, kind of atmosphere. And you can't really compare the two. They're intended to grow different things. They're intended to have different people, or different fruits, I should say, thrive within them. And so our culture is a certain greenhouse. It's one way of doing it. It's not the way of doing it. But we have cared about this stuff from the very beginning of Simple Modern. It's the reason I took that leap on a 6-month contract to say yes. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful that the foundation is there. There's a great quote that I'll reference a lot. And it basically, I'm going to butcher the quote if I try to repeat it, but it basically says something to the effect of, you know, you can either be intentional about your culture, lay it from the beginning, have a foundation, consider it with every decision and in everything that you do, and have a culture, or you can be haphazard. You can not give it any thought. You can kind of, you know, go about it sort of hoping that it forms, but not really giving it much intentionality or thought. And you'll still have a culture. So either way, you have a culture, for better or worse. Yeah. And I think the thing that I am really grateful about Simple Modern is we've cared about this from the very start. And there was a time when we were a little bit concerned about growing the company beyond 10, 15 people, because we thought, are we going to be able to maintain the culture? Like, are we going to be able to maintain the value system and what really makes our heart beat collectively and what we want to go after? And turns out we're at 100 or so now. And I think it's arguably better than it would have been if it was just 10 to 15. And so, but doesn't come by chance. Doesn't come by crossing our fingers. It comes with lots of tensionality. And, you know, so I think some people, you know, to borrow like our line of work, we make these, right? Simple Modern makes these tumblers, water bottles, drinkware products, and those backpacks, other products. And, you know, I think a lot of people might say, well, yeah, we make these products and then we hope to sprinkle in positive culture in doing that. And I would say that at Simple Modern, we actually say, no, we're going to do business this way. This is how we're going to express our values. And we happen to make water bottles while we do it. And we're pretty darn good at it. We make really good water bottles that lots of people like to buy. But really, the heartbeat of what we're doing is why we're doing it in the first place. And I think that's important to distinguish, and something that we take a lot of pride in. So
I like the long answer better than.
Sorry, that was a long one.
I like the long answer better than the canned one that I might find in a book.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not going to be that guy.
But that's even as you were talking about the culture piece, I think it was such a good reminder. I've heard it on systems too. Like, you have a system, whether it's been intentional or you've just drifted towards it and it's just how you do things. Like, you have a system for something. You have a culture at your business. And so for like a small business leader who's either maybe just starting and thinking about hiring people or has just hired and is at 5 to 10 people thinking about going to more, like, you have a culture. What you have to do is think, okay, how do I want to be intentional foundationally, especially those, if we're talking to leaders who want to integrate their work into their faith, like that's going to be like in a foundational. It's going to be a piece of who you are and what your business and how it's going to behave and how it's going to treat people and how it might take chances on people or how it's going to give generously, as an example here. So to be intentional with that, recognize it, and then hire through that lens, build the greenhouse.
So to speak. Well, and I think, it's about the intentionality, like, and we talked before this podcast went live, right? About, hey, we hope this, we hope we speak what we're supposed to speak. We hope we say what we're supposed to say that might benefit one or more people that happen to be listening to this, but let the results play out for themselves, right? And I think it's really easy to clap and applaud because our intentionality in the context of Simple Modern, it has not always been this way for me, but in the context of Simple Modern, it's worked. It's in the eyes of most people, and what most business leaders are measuring things on,
would define
which I could argue is actually needs to be recalibrated. But in that lens, it's worked. It's been successful. And so it's easy to applaud that culture. But what happens for the person that is intentional about their culture, thinks about it from the very beginning, has thought about it, wants it to be great, prays through how it should look like and what it should kind of think and consider through their own faith lens. And then the results aren't there. It doesn't play out. And it's like, to me, when the heart was still behind that, when the expression was still sincere and genuine, that is success in many ways that no one will applaud or clap for because they may not see it. But the focus is beyond the immediate results. Yeah. And it's easy to clap for Simple Modern in some ways. But I do think that that's important to make note, is that we never did it because we hoped to get applause. Yeah. We did it because it felt like the right way to do it. And it's turned out to have worked in this particular situation. But I know a lot of these business leaders, right? Yep. I know a lot of men and women who are going after something they feel is inside of them to build. And it's going hard. It's difficult. It's a slug. It's just not going as easy as they thought. And the easy place to go is, man, what am I doing wrong? What's not, like, God, are you not in this? And I would just argue, like, no. Like, there's something in the challenge as well. And there's different phases along the way and along the journey. This thing is not supposed to be quick and brief, right? It's supposed to be, it's a long journey. And God, God cares more about who we become than he does what we produce.
Wartburg says that the greatest gift, and maybe he got it from Dallas Willard, I can't remember where it came from, but the greatest gift that we can give God is who we become.
That's it, man. That's it. Yeah. I love Wartburg. He's a guy that I follow.
Okay. So I don't know if you hacked my notes, but my notes I really hacked from you. So either way it works. You made my segue for me. So we're not going to do any age things. I recently got told by our awesome HR associate. Hi, Sarah. I recently got told by Sarah that we talk about age a lot around here, at least culturally. So I'm working on not doing that as much. Yeah. But you recently had a post on LinkedIn, and I would encourage any of our viewers, listeners, go check it out. Go check out Jon's profile, and you can find it pretty easy. But when you turned 40, you did 40 things you'd learned by the age of 40, or 40 at 40. Yeah. And I enjoyed the list thoroughly. I enjoyed
Thanks for reading it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I enjoyed the thoughtfulness and the reflection. And so I stole a couple of quotes from it. And you teased into one of them. So I'm going to read the thought, and then I'll ask a question out of it. So the thought you had from that list was: growth in business or in life is not always a graph that's up and to the right, despite a culture that constantly tells us so. Boy, we got all of our buzzwords in there, didn't we? Despite a culture that constantly tells us so. Pruning, peeling, setbacks, and droughts are requirements for fruitful growth. Jon, tell me a story from your business and life that was not up and to the right, yet you view it as growth.
Yeah, man. I mean, well, I think just on principle first, before I get in my specific story, I just think that, it's a very biblical idea that, things are not just going to be trajectory upward all the time. I mean, we actually need pain, challenge, difficulty, suffering, hardship. These are...
That sounds like what I want to sign up for, Jon, when I get into business,
You don't want it.
Yeah.
You don't want it.
But
none of us want it.
But
in fact, we're kind of trained to get rid of it as quickly as possible. Yeah. That's the kind of That's the voice that we hear most of the time around us in the things we watch, the things we listen to. You know, if we're not careful,
there is an American ethos culture of comfort
100%.
and allowing resource and economic prosperity to then thus provide us comfort.
That's
and
right. 100%.
Sure.
Avoid pain at all costs.
Yes.
And I just don't think it's true. I don't think if you close your eyes and picture who you hope to be at 80 years old, you know, for me, that's like, you know, I'm rocking on the porch with my wife, hopefully, and, you know, maybe there's a young guy that's sitting there kind of listening to something I have to say, and you know, but I hope that I have a peaceful demeanor. I hope that I have, you know, joy. I hope that I carry loving kindness. I hope that I carry, you know, the fruits of the Spirit. I don't think that those get produced if I have a life of ease. There's something that's required in pain. Yeah. Now, my pain's different than your pain, different than the listener's pain, different than the pain of the child in Africa who has insurmountable challenges that I would not even be able to, you know, relate to. Yep. But when I say pain and when I'm talking about that, I'm really meaning what's on the inside. Yeah. Not what's on the outside. You know, something that could look like ease to everybody else or a life of comfort might actually be really hard for somebody to walk through. And that's why what matters on the inside is more than what matters on the outside. I tell my kids that all the time. I get no credit for that. Obviously, that's Jesus's words. But you know what's happening on the inside matters more than what's happening on the outside. Yeah. So on principle, I think that's where that come from. I mean, you know, I just kind of mentioned one in my career, at least. It's easy, you know, 7 years later to look back and say like, well, yeah, but that wasn't that big of a setback. That wasn't challenging. That wasn't difficulty. That wasn't drought or hardship. But rewind back to and sit with me for a moment when everybody I know is at work. Yep. I'm spending dollars with no inflow. It's outflow only. Yep. My bank account is just completely, you know, depleting. Yeah. My wife's wondering what we're going to do. My kids have no clue. They're 4 and 2, but I'm looking at them and I'm like, what in the world? How am I going to do this? And, you know, the way I chose to spend my time during those days, you know, there was multiple things, but one of them is I went to a park that's near my house. It'd be like 9:30, 10 o'clock. Everybody's at work. Whatever they do, that's where people are. And I'm sitting at this park just journaling and praying and asking for God to give me direction. And that was challenging. Yeah. That was really, really hard. I was also going through a couple of other things in life at the same time that made it even more difficult. And so I don't have, you know, my story is definitely not one of ascent and, you know, constant, you know, ease and joy all the time. I mean, I've gone through periods of sleepless nights. I've gone through periods of anxiety at high levels. I've gone through periods of questioning what I'm supposed to do and why. Thankfully, I feel like at this point in my life, and I don't have it all figured out, but I feel like some clarity is like, has come in the last few years. But my 30s, man, my 30s were tough. My 30s were really hard. I was glad to turn the page into a new decade because my 30s were hard for me. The way that I articulate why, the best analogy I have, it's like an operating system. It's like, you know, you grab your laptop, you fire it up, you turn it on, you know, you go to turn it on and you're like, why is it not turning on? It worked just fine yesterday. This system did exactly what I needed it to do yesterday, but today it's not turning on. What's happening? And I felt a little bit like that. Like the system that my 20s and that were helpful for me in my 20s, my teens, my 20s, navigating my family of origin, navigating my specific story in those years. I went to turn it on some point in my 30s and it just did not work anymore. And so it was a process of, you know, the wires were just off, and it was a process of just kind of rewiring that system so that so that, you know, and listen, I'm still being rewired. Like the job is not done and won't be done in this lifetime. But some of the gears are firing a little bit better than they did at 32, 33, 36, 39. And I hope they're firing, you know, better than they are in 5 years than they are today.
Yeah.
So that's, sorry, I might be getting away from the question itself. So yeah, I think that's a business, you know, that's a business piece, or at least a career piece for me. There's been personal challenges, for sure. You know, my wife and I, this gets pretty close, and I didn't know if I was going to share this today, but I guess we'll go there. You know, my wife and I have 2 children. They're amazing. My kids are amazing. Every dad says that, but man, my kids are so great. They're amazing kids, 11 and 9 now. My daughter is 11, my son's 9. And we've wanted more kids. We had the first 2. My daughter, the first, what was a little bit challenging for us, you know, just in terms of getting pregnant and having that happen. My son was kind of like very quick. And then it's been, you know, 7.5, 8 years, and there hasn't been another. And so, you know, I think I share this example here in the moment as I'm just thinking about it, because this is a story where, like, you don't have the end, like, praise report.
Come on.
If you want to call it that.
Come on.
You know, this isn't the story you're going to get asked to go up on stage and share, because there's not the applauded result at the end. Yeah. This is still an empty place for me and my wife, and a place where God has to fill it in every way.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, so it's inconclusive, you know. We're sitting, gosh, I was reading Hebrews the other day, and you know, the men of faith, or the men and women of faith that they talk about, you know, the kind of hall of faith, as some may call it. You know, it says specifically something to the effect of, they did not receive the promise.
Yep.
They did not yet see the promise.
Yep.
Because it didn't come in their lifetime.
Yep.
So the point is that it's not for earthly reward. Like we don't navigate the days so that on earth we get all the fruits. This thing is an eternal game.
Yeah. And
if we're going to have an eternal perspective, it might mean that we don't actually get to see what's going on the other side.
Yeah.
And for me and my wife, that's been a tangible reality for us. And we continue to walk through that. And there's times of still challenge and weakness where that faith is little, you know. And then there's times when I'm like, man, I believe this so much that, you know, it doesn't rattle me. But the gratitude that I have for my kids, man, it's interesting. You think about this. Had I known about some of our fertility struggles before 2 kids, and then you have 2 kids,
you would have.
That's the story everybody wants to hear.
You bet. You've been immensely grateful.
You'd be immensely grateful.
So it's the awareness timing piece.
It's the timing thing.
Yeah.
So instead, we have 2 kids, and then we find out, holy smokes, these 2 kids are actually miracles of God.
Yeah.
Every kid is a miracle of God.
Yeah.
But these 2 in particular are miracles from God that the stats would not make it seem feasible.
Yeah.
Can I have that excitement, that gratitude, that joy for the ability to be a dad to those 2, you know, to those 2? Can I carry that in my heart in the same way that I would otherwise carry? I think that's important for me. Yeah. That's important for me to foster. So yeah, it's not always up and to the right, man. Life is hard. There's challenges, there's difficulty, and we can so quickly think that we're off course when circumstances get difficult. It's what's on the inside. It's not what's on the outside, man.
Man, thank you for having the courage to share all that. Like we talk about courageous authenticity. Like that's a principle we believe at Restoration Group for integrating your work into your faith. So that is an act of it. to share that story and that journey, because that whole time is overlapping with the business journey 100%. That you're talking about. And to think that they aren't colliding with each other when you're sitting at the park and processing insecurity, inadequacy, faith, all those elements while pursuing the job, to think that all of that you and your wife were processing in that season, like those are all intertwined.
That's right.
And the weight of that, the reality of that. And so anyone who's listening, like, recognize the personal and the professional, and they all weave together, because we are whole human beings. God created us for work and for life and for life and for work, and it all goes together. It's all integrated. And so I just thank you for having the courage to share, because somebody's going through something, and to encourage them about how it's affecting their work. You know, it's going through something in their personal life.
Sure.
It can encourage them that if it's affecting their work, that's okay. That's 100%. A part of the season, and it goes both directions, right? 100%. And work can affect home and all these pieces.
We would love to think that life is compartmentalized. And I think in some ways we try to do that, okay, this is my work life. This is my family life. This is my friends and community. This is kind of, nonprofits or organizations I'm a part of. And we kind of keep these things separate to kind of maintain, because we're really busy, and it's very difficult to take it all on if you're not careful. And I think in some ways I've actually tried to spend intentional time the last 10, 15 years decompartmentalizing my life. This is all life.
Yeah.
There is no separating these things, man. Clay, you woke up this morning, and I don't know what happened at your house, but to think that doesn't come in, and now you're doing podcast recordings, and you do have to find the skill of being able to set that aside so you can focus on
inhibit and focus and do
100%,
of course.
But to think that doesn't affect things, I mean, it's just it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that all of that helps shape us and helps us make decisions and helps us navigate life, and God's in it all. He's in all those things, and that's the beauty of it. But it's challenging, and if we're not careful, we chase the wrong things because we're compartmentalizing things.
Yeah.
And what God's really asking us to say is like, hey, I want your life. I don't want 70% of your life. I want all of it.
Yep.
And that means my career, and it means my title, and it means my salary, and it means my resume. And it means where I live, and it means my house, and it means my kids, and it means my possessions, and it means my friendships, and it means it all.
Yep.
And Lord help us, because we can't do this on our own, but that's the hope.
Yeah.
So
I want to double click a couple of things out of that last story and segment before I move to kind of the last bucket we've got that I want to talk through. One was the, you talked about the operating system, the iOS. It sounded a lot like Anderson and Adams, like Scaling Leadership, LCP. I don't know. Have you encountered any of that?
No.
Okay. Look it up. So again, leadership circle profile, but it sounded a lot talking about our iOS, our internal operating systems, and the scaling, the release, the growth of them through decades in maturation and leadership awareness, et cetera. So sounded a lot like that. And then the other, you just kept talking about the hard seasons and what it produces, not being up and to the right always. And we've already had the fruit metaphor. We've already worked on the fruit metaphor in the greenhouses, but really we're talking about John 15 when you're talking about the hard, right? The cutting back, the pruning.
100%.
And we've talked about this numerous times on the podcast and other episodes. And I just always, it's a great reminder for me, right, that in John 15, all of the branches get cut back. The dead ones that are producing nothing get cut off and thrown away and burned. And then the ones that are producing fruit get what? They get cut back to do what? Produce more fruit. And then the fruit is supposed to produce is Galatians 5, fruit of the Spirit. Which is not prosperity, resources, riches, etc. It is the fruits of the Spirit, which joy, you talked about multiple times, kindness, peace, all these pieces that we're supposed to get from this pruning season.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of those seasons. But beauty is a hard word to use when it's being cut back and painful and confusing, and the new growth hasn't come yet.
It is.
Those are the challenging seasons. And I just heard a lot of that theme in what you were sharing there.
It's really good, Clay. And I think, just to tie a bone on it, maybe, success, and I put that in quotes, and fruitfulness are not the same things. And God, we're just short-sighted, you know, and I'm guilty as charged, but we look at circumstances to define whether something's fruitful.
Yeah.
And so much of what's fruitful is in the unseen. And, you know, we've got to continue to press in to ask God for the eyes to see and the ears to hear.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay, I got another quote from your 40 on 40 or 40 thoughts from 40 years old. Involve your spouse in your business dealings. Introduce them to clients. Involve them in decisions. Give them access to help shape your career. Behind prayer, nothing has helped my career decisions more than my wife's insights and ideas. So I want to ask on two different things you talked about there, prayer and involving your wife. How do you structure prayer around and for your work? How do you personally structure prayer around and for your work?
How practical do you want me to get?
As practical as you want to go.
I mean, gosh, man. I mean, first and foremost, man, I mean, I can't possibly shepherd what I'm entrusted to shepherd if I am not shepherded. So I could do it on my own strength. It would not be very successful, or there's that word again. It would not be very, very fruitful. I think that first and foremost, most of my prayer life is just when it comes to work, and it doesn't feel like work because again, it's not compartmentalized, but it feels like, God, give me the strength today, help me to remember who I am, to remember, why I'm here, to be intentional. Can I have one conversation today that might impact somebody in a profound way? Can I make one decision today that enhances somebody else's life more than it does my own? This is my flesh doesn't want to do these things, right? But I have to pray for that if I want to be a good leader. I mean, leadership, most, I think I believe what I'm about to say.
Oh boy, I like it. If not, you can come back on and tell me, I changed my mind. I disagree with myself.
Most of what makes a good leader happens in things never seen. It's not the stage, the speeches, the leadership, the meetings, it's in the unseen. What are they doing in the secret place? And that, for me, if I'm going to be a good leader, it just has to be prioritized. I don't have an option. I think at one time it felt kind of dutiful, if I'm honest. But I think over time, it's become it's like water. Running has been that way for me. You and I know. When we would be doing off-season soccer, back in high school,
way back in the day, I
won't name names, but there was a certain coach who,
you could call him out. That's fine.
he was, he's clocking us and he's timing us, and we had to get under this much, we had to run this many miles under this certain time, and it created a situation for me where, like, man, I don't really enjoy running that much, Well, then when I got to be a little older, I actually went for a run, and I didn't time myself. Imagine that. There was no clock.
You just ran.
And I just ran.
And you enjoyed it?
And I liked it.
Yeah.
And of course, like, it's obligatory from time to time because I want to stay healthy and I'm getting older and all those things. But really, running has become therapeutic for me. Yeah. It's moved beyond. That was another one of my 40 thoughts, actually. I don't know if you remember reading that, but it's moved beyond. Yeah. It's moved beyond I'm doing this for exercise so I can stay in good shape and whatever. It's actually, there's mental clarity that comes. It's therapeutic. It's like I kind of need to run, not every day, but every so often. And prayer for my day and for my work and for my ability as a dad and my ability as a husband it's necessary, man. I mean, I can't not do it. So yeah, I mean, I think there's that. And there's this odd tension when it comes to our careers and what we put our hands to is like you have to be committed enough and dedicated enough to push past the challenges, to push past the setbacks, to push past the, the things that may make you get derailed. No good startup happens if you don't go through some of those pieces.
Yeah.
So you got to have that, but you also have to be very open-handed at the same time that says, God, what? Not my will, your will. And if this isn't it, I need you to tell me. And somehow we can navigate that tension. We can navigate every day, committed, dedicated, wholeheartedly in on something we feel passionate about. And yet, if God speaks it, we change direction and we move course, and we're quick to listen to his voice and not our own. And that is that requires, I mean, gosh, I hope I'm hitting on your question, but this requires, I mean, this isn't just like, okay, I checked that box and now I get to move on. This is a posture of prayer. This is like, prayer for me isn't like a dedicated time, and then the rest of the time my mind is a completely different mentality. I mean, like ideally we're walking in the Spirit. We're walking ideally in a place where like our mind is changed. It's shaped to be a kingdom mindset. And therefore our prayer life and our life is like, it starts to at least blend together a little bit.
Okay. So am
I making sense?
1,000%. I agree 1,000%. Give a practical way for a leader who's listening, who's like, that's awesome, Jon. I'm not there. I'm not at that place yet. Give me a practical way to apply. Because again, we can't, there are healthy boundaries in business that we can't cross, right? Religious lines.
Sure.
Like you have to honor them, especially in an HR and a culture space. Like we have to be very wise about that.
Right.
And we have to be stewards of that and respectful of the laws. And at the same time, how can a leader practically structure their own world life to start doing it when it isn't, because what you're talking about is a higher level of integration. You're talking about it being in a functioning and I'm in connection with the Spirit at all times.
Right.
And give me a practical structure.
And listen, I got a long way to go. Okay?
We all do.
I mean,
it's a journey. No one arrives on it.
A lot of what I'm saying is aspirational. It's what we aspire to.
Yeah.
But practically, I mean, for me, I wake up really early. I wake up at between 5 and 5:15.
Yeah.
And the very first thing I do every day is I go out in my favorite place in my house, which is our front porch.
You set an alarm at your house? Because this is my great conundrum. Don't answer that question. I'll just answer it for myself. We set an alarm. Don't answer it because I don't want that in public record. We set an alarm and I don't want to turn it off in the morning because of the fact that I don't want to wake kids up. And this morning it was cool outside and I was really grumpy with myself that I didn't have access to get out. I was like, I want to go sit on my back porch. Don't answer the other question, by the way. Keep going. Okay.
No.
So you go sit on the front porch.
I sit on the front porch.
Yes.
And I just have dedicated space,
yes.
right? And that's practical. And then I'm obviously, there are days when that doesn't happen. It's not a perfect track record.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there's lots of grace.
Uh-huh.
And then, I try in the middle of my day to re-engage God.
Oh, that's good.
Practically.
At some point.
For me, we have a pond around at our office, and there's a little walkway that goes around that the pond is. Usually, like, I've wrapped up lunch. I haven't dove back into responsibilities.
It's good.
I will take 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and go for a walk around this pond and re-engage God into my day.
It's good.
It's just an awareness of that He's there. That's probably the most practical thing I could say. So yeah, and you mentioned, well, I won't lead into that. So that's probably the most practical thing I could say.
And that is actually really practical. So just to like viewer, listener, grab that, because what it is begin, realign, set our posture at the start of a day, recognize that life and the slaying of the business dragon and all of these things happen between here and the end of a day. take a moment, whatever it is, and everybody's trigger or time to set it is going to be different. Like yours is the lunch, and I'm going to go walk and get outside, which the outside piece, I go on walks here near our office all the time to try to do that. But set a spot to be able to just realign, to then be able to finish well. That's a really practical way of doing it. So good share. Thanks, Jon.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm close to our time, but I want to ask this question. So you got to give a concise answer.
I'll be brief.
Okay. How do you navigate? So we've talked about integration. We've talked about how it all affects each other, right?
Right.
How do you navigate healthy boundaries? Because there still have to be boundaries in life.
Yeah.
So not compartmentalizing life, but there have to be healthy boundaries. How do you have healthy boundaries and invite your wife deeply into your work? How do you keep that like dynamic balancing going on?
It's such a good question, man. I wish my wife was here. She could give you a much better answer, I'm sure, because she's just amazing in that way. Again, I didn't join. My career has not happened without my wife's involvement.
Yep.
I can't passionately continue to engage in my work with the kind of like, passion that I want to engage with my work if my wife is on a different page. So we're regularly catching up on what's going on, what's happening, how work's going. I try not, and I am not, she would tell you that I'm not perfect at this. I try not to come home and just dump all my frustrations from the day onto her. But I will, she's really good at asking questions. And I also try to be aware, like, how's her day been? She works herself part-time and she's home, and my wife, is getting more done in a day than I could even, like dream to accomplish. And I have to be aware of how she's doing before I bring my junk home about how work's going or the challenges I had or whatever. But I want her to be involved. And so some days that might mean we're talking about it, we're catching up. And some days that might mean, you know what, like, it was a good day. Like it was a fine day, like I got lots to tell you, but we'll touch base on that later, you know, and being aware of where she's at and being, and recognizing that. But yeah, she has to be involved. It's, I also, going to the 40 on, the 40 thought that you read, I want people to know my wife, because you don't know me if you don't know my wife.
That's good.
She is such an amazing woman, and so much of who I am is a function of her and her strengths and skill sets. Like I want people to know her, because if they know her, they know me in a little bit of a better way. And that's what I would say in terms of just involving her, but never to the extent that she doesn't want to, or to the extent that it's beyond what our boundaries are. And when I go on vacation or when I set the work aside, I have to set the work aside as best I can. But I also want her engaged, and I want her a part of that in every way. And as much as little as she's willing to kind of give me. But it's really on, I think, to summarize what I said, I think it's at her pace. It's to the degree that she has capacity to want to engage, which she does often, is when that invitation is always there.
You don't know me if you don't know my wife. That's good for with two becoming one. Like, that's just, even to think about that level of like awareness and truth. I think that is really good. Yeah. To be able to want to share that with others and at your workspace. That's really good, Jon.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Okay, final thoughts. Anything you want to wrap up with?
Man, no, this was really good conversation. I honestly, I'm just honored to be here. I think we were talking at the beginning, like I was hesitant to even do this podcast because I don't really want my name associated, with applause or that like I have it all figured out. And not that any of your questions have led to that, but I'm just a normal man. I'm just a normal guy.
Yeah.
And but I think we serve an amazing, wonderful God. And he's uniquely made every person that's listening to this podcast right now. He's made you unique.
Yep.
You have a personality and gift and skill set and wiring and background and experience and upbringing and all the things that make us who we are. You have all of that intertwines to where you are literally unlike anyone else on the planet. And there's something unique for you to bring to the world. And I'm still trying to work on what mine is, but I at least believe that. And I think that's where it starts. Do we believe that we have something unique to offer the world? And if so, like, how do we embark on the journey to discover it?
Yeah.
And it's a lifetime of discovery.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe that's my final charge. My final charge to me and to you and anybody else who cares to listen.
Yeah.
You know, God is the one that really gets the credit, and we're just his vessels. And it's just an honor and privilege to be able to share some thoughts with you.
Yeah, man. Well, brother, it was great to catch up, as we said, like catching up with microphones,
That's it, man.
catching up. But again, thanks for your courageous authenticity. Continue on that journey, right? Because we do never arrive. We never arrive. And appreciate you sharing with me and with all our viewers and listeners. And for everybody who watched and or listened this week, thank you. And until next week, choose life. Thank you for tuning in. To find out more about how Restoration Group can serve you or your business, click the link in the show notes below or go to restorationgroup.co.